Hello folks, this is Leah Bonasage from Master Lab Systems. Today we'll be looking at deploying Splunk with Docker for observability and log monitoring. Okay? So a week ago I received a request to export logs to Splunk using OTel, of which is one of the topics that we'll be also looking at how we can export those logs, or we can observe our applications logs using OTel and export those to Splunk UI. Okay. However, today let's look at the agenda for today's topic. So we'll take a peek intro to Splunk and Docker, look at why containerizing Splunk, set up and run with Docker, access the Splunk UI, and enable HEC, which is HTTP event collector, and test those logs we have exported. Okay. So let's take a look at the intro to Splunk and Docker. What is Splunk? So Splunk is a powerful platform for searching, analyzing, and visualizing machine data. While it is commonly used for log management, monitoring, and security analytics. Also, it supports integrations with OpenTelemetry, APIs, and various data sources. While Docker, it is a containerized platform that lets you package and run software consistently, which is also platform independent. It simplifies deployment, scaling, and environment management. Lastly, it is ideal for running Splunk in an isolated, reproducible environment. Okay? So now let's look at why use Docker for Splunk. To quick deployment and clean up, consistent environment, and there is no complex manual installation which is required. And lastly, it is easy to configure through environment variables, which is something we will also be looking at how we can pass those environment variables to configure Splunk to run on Docker. Okay? Let's look at the prerequisites that we require for this demo. So, of course, we require Docker, ensure Docker is installed, and Docker Compose as well. Well, essentially, Docker ensure Docker is installed, and you can be able to do a Docker dash version to display your version of Docker. And also you require at least 4 GB of RAM, which is 4 GB of memory, that will be requiring as well. And lastly, a terminal or Windows PowerShell, macOS Linux or shell, depending on whatever shell you're using. So also to be clear, the 4 GB of RAM isn't only for Docker, it's also Docker. Once you've installed Docker, you require about 2 GB of RAM of memory to install Docker on a machine, but to run a Splunk image, you will also require another 2 GB of RAM, which is essentially roughly to 4 GB and above. Okay, so let's look at how we can run Docker we can run Splunk in a Docker environment. Okay, so the first command that I have there, it's essentially the command that we'll be using to run Splunk in our Docker environment. So I will just quickly do an explanation of this command. So of course, the first argument is docker run -d name, it's the image name, which is Splunk, and the user root. It's important, the user, which is the dash user, it's important that you specify a root, because at runtime environment, Splunk will try to unpack all of its dependencies, and if you are not a root user, it will fail because of the permission issues. So it's important to specify the dash user as root, so it can give Splunk some privileged access when it comes to unpacking the dependencies. So let's look at the first command now, which is -p, which is the internal, the -p, which is 8000 internal port and 8000 external port. That's to run the Splunk UI. And another parameter, which is the -p as well, which is 8088 internal, 8088 external port, which is now for the HTTP event collector, which is commonly known as the HEC, what Splunk uses to collect logs. And then lastly, the last -p argument, it's for the data receiver port for Splunk, which Splunk uses to export the data to the UI. So which runs on port 9000, 997 and colon 9997. So and the rest it's Splunk's arguments, which is now we are also which is the environment variables such as the accepted arguments, which is the accepted license, and the second argument, which is another -e, which is the Splunk password. So again, it depends on any password you might want to require, you might want to add, so you can pass any password as you like, depending on yourself. Again, another -p, which is this one now, so which stands for which passes another parameter called Splunk general terms. So again, so also it's important to accept those. Again, you can do the exact same thing at the interface, but it's important when you are deploying those, which is the other environment variables. Those you can also do them at the interface, of which I will also be showing you that as well, how you can pass or create those other environment variables using the Splunk UI. Okay, so same thing as like the Splunk enable HEC through, and the other one Splunk HEC token, which is again exactly the same token as my password, not as my password, but the token that will be required to authenticate with Splunk when you are testing or when you are exporting those logs. Okay, but of course I'll still show you on how you can do the same thing to the Splunk UI. Yes, so they said port 8000, that's where Splunk's web UI or the interface for Splunk runs at, and port 888, which is commonly the HTTP event collector, which is like commonly known as the HEC. It's what Splunk uses to collect those events, metrics, and logs. And port 9997, that's commonly known as the data receiver port, which is what Splunk uses to receive the data and export it using the HTTP event collector. Okay, so now let's look at configuring Splunk and accessing the Splunk UI. As I said, as I already gave the explanation, what runs on port 8080, what runs on port 8000, what runs on port 9997. So again, port 8000, that's Splunk web UI, which runs the interface, and then port 8088, that's the HTTP event collector, which is the HEC, which is normally commonly used by these log collector tools such as OpenTelemetry, and also it can be Prometheus if you're using Prometheus. But in this case, we'll be using OpenTelemetry using the OTA for this demo, okay, to send those logs. So looking now at 9997, so that's the port Splunk uses to forward those logs to the UI. And again, once you have done your deployment successfully, of which what we'll be doing, you can access Splunk at localhost port 8000, that's the default port for running the web UI, using your admin you've created, your admin username, and your password that you've passed as the parameter. And again, so once you are enabled and once you have logged in successfully to the Splunk UI, you can then now start to create what again the other environment variables that if you didn't pass them while we were deploying. So of course, to enable the HEC, which is the HTTP event collector, once you have logged in, I will also show you again, but it's mainly you go to settings, data inputs, HTTP event collector, global settings, you turn it on, you click on the new token, depending whatever name you give it. And once you have done the name, give it the name, you create the token and then you copy it again. So this process that I'm showing you here, it's pretty much the same as you were to run these environment variables directly when you are deploying or when you are running the Docker command. So again, as you can see, Splunk HEC token, that's the same token I'm telling you. Once you have done, you can just you can immediately create it on your settings, on your data inputs. So it's pretty much this token, and again the name of the token, which is again what I'm passing here, this parameter. So which is this one, yes, and also the port that it needs to run. So again, that's pretty much the same thing that we can do here. Okay, so moving on. Okay, again, testing now with the HEC using Cal. So again, once we have done the deployment or we've run the docker-d command to deploy Splunk, we'll quickly do a test run by sending a curl request to our event collector and view those logs from the Splunk UI. Okay, so now that folks, we can start to run the Docker command. Okay, so again, ensure that you have a Docker installed. So for example, if I were to start my terminal, I'll try to start my terminal. Again, this thing is very powerful, so you have to have a stronger machine to be able to run this. So again, once you have done that, I'm just gonna start up my Windows terminal. Okay, so now I'm just gonna give you a basic on how you can run this, as I've already run did the process. If I were to run the same command again, it will crash my machine because of my machine is not too high powerful. But anyway, so again, first of all, as I said, be able to check if Docker is installed successfully using this command. So docker -- version. So it needs to give you your version of your Docker. Okay, as you can see, at my machine, Docker is installed successfully. So now we need to do what? So docker ps. So now, as I've already run this on my side, so anyway, before even doing that, so now we can copy now the command from our presentation, which is the command to run Splunk. Just need to copy that command again, okay, which is this one. Okay, so now I already have a proper snippet from it. So this is the command that we need to be executing. So again, I've already done this process, so I'm just gonna, okay, it's 12. Okay, since I don't want it to run, but of course from here you'd have to probably make it as a one-liner. So to make it as a one-liner, it's important that you remove the escape characters. So this would how it would look like when we've made the command as the one-liner, so it can be able to execute properly. So I'm just gonna fix it. Yes, -p, and then put the -e. It's gonna be too long because of we are passing so many environment variables. So again, we have to make it like that to ensure it can be able to execute fine. Because if I don't make it as a one-liner, it won't execute, as I've seen already, because my terminal doesn't accept commands that are passed that are not one-liners. Okay, so now let's fix this one. Okay, so now we are done making this command as a one-liner. Okay, so now that this command is like this, so now we can be able to copy it as is. So as I said, of course, docker-t. So now this is how it would look like. Exactly, as you can see now, it's pasting its file. So if I were to run it, of course, it would take forever to load, and it might also disrupt our session because of I've already executed this command before, and now it would take time to reload all the configs and stuff, and it might make my PC to run slow. So now this is the command, just in case you need it or maybe you wanna see it. This is how it would look like if we were to run this command again. But of course, once we have run it, now we should be able to list out or to view the current image is running. So a case is this case, I will do docker ps, so it needs to list my current running Docker images. You can see that's my Splunk, same thing that it did, which is the exact same command that executed. As you can see again, even the other ports are still there, all of the HEC collector and the UI as well, and even the port forwarder, okay, the log forwarder. So once all of it is in place, again, if you have your Docker, you can still be able to view it again on your Docker desktop, which is your interface for Docker desktop. So I'll also show you a peek on my side. So this is my Splunk image. As you can see, currently it is using already about close to roughly 4 gig. So very important to have a powerful machine. So as you can see, it is my interface, which is the web UI for Splunk, and that is the which is the HEC, the HTTP event collector, and it's a log forwarder. Okay, so once you have all of those, it means Splunk is running successfully fine. So okay, now we are ready to begin to test by sending the logs. Okay, so from here, I will take you now to Splunk's interface. So again, so you can be able it means once you've done this process, your Splunk's images or your Splunk's container is up and running. So now it means we can now begin to go to the interface for Splunk. Okay. So now, okay, maybe I might have to start out again. So I'll close this and maybe try to run it. Okay, so let's try to log in now again. Localhost port 8000, just in case we are logging in for the first time. It might okay, maybe let me also log out, because this is how it will be like when you are logging for the first time. So okay, once you have done with deployment, running, ensure that Splunk is running fine on Docker. It means now this is the interface you will be seeing for the first time, of course, and then of course the environment variables you have provided and your password. So admin, that's my admin username, and the password that I have passed, which is the one that we've passed here. So I'm using this password that we've passed as this parameter here. So now once we have that in, you can sign in. So again, I'll show you now how you can create again, which is what again, how you want to do to create the HEC token and enable the HEC, so you can be able to receive and get those logs and use the log to export those logs to Splunk UI. So again, which is important. So we come to settings. So from settings, you go to data inputs. So from data inputs, again, this process, it's again, you can do it when you are deploying Docker. It's all fine, but if you are not sure on your environment variables when you are running Splunk on Docker, you can still do the same process here. So again, we go to where? We go to HTTP event collector, which is the HEC. So do what? Add a new. So once you have added, so you come in here to add a new token. So again, you give it the token name. So maybe I might give it and say demo logs. Maybe say demo logs, or just do demo logs. Okay, source. Source, you can say HEC as the source. Of course, there are so many sources, so that one is not really relevant, because of you could be getting your logs from your API, from your third-party applications, from your databases. So again, there's a lot of sources that you can provide there depending on your scenario or your case. So description, you can give it a new description if you want. And again, let's enable the index acknowledgement. So once you have that in, it's fine. I can leave this one as is, and then you go to click to next. So here, let's do this. So here, this means out where your logs will be collected under which index. So Splunk uses 3 main index, which is the history, the main, and the summary. So I would advise to add all of them. Yes, let's add all of them and ensure it means now Splunk ensure it's also on automatic. So we don't really need this because we want to target everything. So again, once you've added all your indexes, you click on review. So now it will create what? Your token, your input token, which is the same token I showed you. But of course, in this case, I was declaring it manually. But still, this is now this HEC token that it will be creating. Okay, so now let's go again to our interface. So once you, as you can see, allowed indexes, these are all of our indexes. And so now it will, this is the name of the token, but it will also give us the token now. So if we do now submit, we should be getting our token back. So as you can see, folks, that's when it says token has been created successfully. So it means now we can get this token. So this is the token we'll be using to authenticate, or we'll be using for HEC to authenticate Splunk when it's sending the logs. Okay, so of course, if now I were to use that token, I was going to come in here and replace it with this token, with this new one that I've copied. So of course, it will still work the same way, but of course I'll keep this one as is because I want to use this one for now. Okay. So now that you've created it successfully, so again you can begin now to use that same token either to your applications when you need to be sending logs to Splunk, but of course I'll try to create a new tutorial as well when we are exporting logs to Splunk using OTel from a Java Spring Boot application. Okay, but for now we're just going to be doing a basic curl request to test, just to send logs using the HEC, using a basic curl request. Now that you are done here, so again it gives you a way that once you are done here, you can open up a playground where you can filter out your query logs. You can see automatically gives you a query that you could use. So which is what, of course, this one, it's new because of we just created it now. It means there is no data coming into it, which is from that source HEC. So it means now we will be creating what we can now begin to send what our own query. So I have some snippet here on the query that I would like to use. So again, this is my basic testing query that I want to send, which is this one. So maybe I'm just gonna copy it. Maybe if I do a CLS just to clear. Okay, so now I'll explain this query as well. So we have this query now that goes to Splunk. So again, when you are testing from again, either way, when you are using this or when you're exporting your logs to Splunk, you have to use the OTel endpoint, since it's what collects the logs. So as you can see here from my side, I'm using what? The OTel, the HEC, which is the HEC URL, or where the HEC runs, because it's what collects the logs. And then the HEC will then forward them using the port forwarder, that is 9997, and then that 9997 port, which is that port forwarder, will then forward the logs to the Splunk UI or Splunk user interface. So again, each time that you want to send logs to Splunk, you need to send it through this log collector, which is the collector event. So it goes to localhost port 8088 services collector event. Okay, authorization, of course you have to provide Splunk and the token you've created, which is that token I showed you. You need to copy now that token and substitute it here. Of course, we are sending a JSON object. So again, this is the event that I'm trying to send. Hello from Splunk talk, or maybe say hello Splunk from Web Systems via Docker. Okay, so now we need to be sending this event to our Splunk UI or to our Splunk collector, then we can visualize that to the Splunk UI. Okay, so if I were to hit enter now, exactly, so we should be getting this message here when everything has been sent successfully. This response says saying test success code 0. It means the event was successfully sent to Splunk and we can begin to visualize it. right? So now if again we go to Splunk interface just to test now and to visualize this log that we've sent, or this event that we've sent. So again, I have another query here that I would like to use, which also simpler. I'm just gonna copy it, maybe just copy the text name. So because it's important, sometimes you might have to provide the event name that you've filtered with, though it's not really important. I mean, once you've provided the source, everything else, it doesn't really matter. So, but of course, in this case, I would just like to use the full search or the full text search keyword that I've used here. Okay, and then I copy my query now, my query, which is my Splunk query. Okay, so of course I'll explain how that what the query means. So now we need to provide it here so we can visualize, so we can be able to visualize or to view the event we just sent. So of course it goes to internal index. As I said, index was main. It goes to main. I know it goes to main because of this one, we didn't even create it. So it goes to main index, but of course important to provide it just in case we want to target multiple indexes and where your data or where your events are, you're not really sure, so you might want to add all of them. Okay, so again, index, it's dash internal or index main. Those are two indexes on targeting. The search keyword, hello Splunk, from that add the time in the table, times host source, everything. Though these are not really mandatory, but you might want to add them depending on your use case, of course. So now that we have the full search query, I'm just going to hit enter. Of course, now we are getting back our log, which is our event that we've sent. So as you can see, it is our event and it came through this time. So it means that's our need time, we need host. Yes, again, as you can see, the host, local host, came through the collector, which is the HEC event collector. It came through it via port 8080, and this is the source, which is the Splunk HEC token, and that's the source type, HTTP event. Okay, that's it, folks. So now we're getting back our data on Splunk, meaning we can visualize our data on Splunk. So okay, maybe you might want to visualize it like this, but it doesn't really matter. So again, as you can see, if you were to visualize it like this, but of course we just sent one log, so we're not gonna see any too much spike or too much graphical there because of this is just one log, unless maybe you can send multiple ones. But of course, as you can see, there is one event, this is the event, so it means everything is working fine. So we are able to send some logs to Splunk and visualize those. Okay, so once we have these, folks, yes, something I'll summarize now. So once you have all of this, okay, you might wanna now, once you're done, as I said, Splunk uses too much memory. So again, once you on your local environment, you might want to disable as soon as you're done sending your logs or when you are done doing the test cases. So now that we have all our data in Splunk, so it means now the next topic, we'll be looking at exporting these logs from an application now from our code side. So I'll try to create a basic Java service and then add OpenTelemetry to export these metrics to Splunk UI, and then using OTel, then we can take it from there. Okay, so now I will disable Splunk as I'm already done showing you the demo, and then now we can finalize our demo slides. Okay, so now once we, okay, so now it's stopping out. Okay, so now is Splunk have stopped, so it means now I've already covered this part. So now we can look at common issues and fixes. Yes, there's a lot of common issues and fixes. So sometimes when you have sent your first request, you might get a message called data channel is missing. so which is normally being caused by your HEC token. So for example, in this case, let's say I were to send again this query, but now, exactly, instead of now getting again this text success code, we get what? A data channel is missing. So normally that is caused by what? By your HEC token. Either the token is invalid or the HEC isn't enabled on Splunk. So that normally usually the case. Sometimes Splunk not loading, which is normally also another use cases whereby maybe you might have deployed fine your Splunk and then everything fine, it seems to be running even here, but suddenly when you're trying to send when you're trying to load it on the browser but not getting anything. So sometimes, as I've said, Splunk is a very powerful tool and it's very complex. So sometimes it's important that if your memory is being out, or if your machine is being out of memory, so usually that's also the cause. So it's important to also adjust your memory, token memory, so it can match the required for Splunk. Also, lastly, the SSL errors. So of course, sometimes you can use the dash key flag for local testing just to ensure there are no, or just to debug the SSL errors if it's an SSL error case. But of course, for local environment, you barely get this one. It's normally the two. Either the data channel is missing or the Splunk not loading. Okay. But of course, whatever case you are getting into case, you can just let me know. We can look at it and try to troubleshoot it. Okay. Again, the next steps. So we looked at how to Dockerize Splunk, accessing Splunk UI, enable and test the HTTP event collector. We send the logs via curl. And then lastly, we will look at our next tutorial. We'll look at connecting a Java Spring Boot or a Python Fast API project to export logs to Splunk using OpenTelemetry via OTA. Okay? Folks, I'll be ending here. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and catch you up next time. Cheers. Peace.